Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Good morning. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the program. It's Pot Up with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Got an action-packed show today. We'll have Brent Beaird here in just a minute, talk a little college football. There's always something going on in college football these days. Second portion of today's program, Kyle Crooks will be joined by Graham Hall. They can talk a lot of recruiting and Gator sports as well. If you missed it last night, Gators convincing win over South Carolina. And now the dreaded stretch that I don't know if I've ever seen in college basketball starts with Tennessee, Kansas State, Alabama, and then Kentucky. So we wish them well. They're playing pretty well. You know, a lot of people were upset with the Ty Golden hire. I think he's doing a tremendous job. You look at the other two new coaches, I believe, in the league, LSU and South Carolina. Boy, they're bad basketball teams. But well, if you got questions about that, give us a shout. Let's go to the Titan Tomorrow hotline now. We're joined by our college football analyst and Heisman Trophy voter, Brent Beaird. Good morning, Brent. How are you, buddy?
Shane, I'm doing well. The interesting thing about this Gator basketball team, they should have two more wins over one of the better teams in the league, and that's Texas A&M. Now, they basically had chances to beat A&M at the end of the game and just weren't able to do it, and we saw how good A&M was last night, going to Auburn, breaking the longest home winning streak in the nation. So I'm with you. It's going to be a tough stretch, but they are playing better.
Yeah. Quick question before we jump into it. Andy asked here on Facebook Live, brought to you by Mellon Law. He asked, "Am I surprised Will Levis is rated or ranked or supposed to be selected number 5 and Anthony's number 9 in Mel Kiper's draft projections?" No. You know, it's between Will Levis and C.J. Stroud, the first quarterback off the board. You know, the tape shows that, you know, they scout all this stuff and does it mean anything? Who knows? But they have them rated higher than AR. AR will tear up the combine. I'll tell you that. If he goes there, he will tear it up. But again, combine ain't playing football. So we wish him well. We'll see how it pans out for him. Brent, the NIL, still the news out there in college football. What can you tell us about the NIL right now?
Well, here's the interesting thing, and I give Football Scoop credit for this. And this is a byproduct of the NIL that is actually positive. If you're a college football fan, the number of early entrants into the draft has gone down considerably. In 2023, there were 82 players who went early into the draft. 2022, there were 100. And then in 2021, there were 128. So from crunching the numbers here, that's frankly significant. Now, look, there may be a lot of reasons for that beyond NIL, but if there is a good thing about NIL, Shane, some of these guys, and we talk about it every year, that really have no business going out early, but they've got people whispering in their ear that they need to do that. For some of those guys, instead of going early and being drafted way down from what they thought they were, they can actually stay another year, improve their skills, get some money while they're doing that, and be much better off going into the next year. So that's something that came out this week that really deserves a lot more attention that it's getting. And again, I'm not saying that's a whole reason for it, but in the NIL, that this is the first time we've seen 4 fewer players enter the draft, and that can have something to do with it.
That is true. Text from yesterday on the Titan Tomorrow text line from Chris in Cottondale said, "I was upset with the guy talking about Seth Harp not calling JC JR, but because he tried to compare Todd Golden to Brad Stevens. Love the guy's energy. Liked him calling JC JR, but the coaching comparison he made caused me to get off his bandwagon. I didn't see that, but I had Seth Harp on one day when I couldn't get on, and I guess he compared Brad Stevens and Todd Golden. Look, Brad Stevens was a tremendous coach at Butler, but he had to start somewhere. I don't know how good they were when he first started. So
Right.
I can't hate that comparison. I mean, I'd have to look at the numbers, and we have to wait and see how it pans out. One more text before we get rumor out there that Billy D is interested in Texas. Have you heard Billy Donovan's name for the Texas job? I don't know why in the
No, I
hell
mean,
Billy Donovan want to coach college basketball again.
No, I don't think so either. And again, you've got, and listen, Texas, Barnes of Tennessee was there. He had some success. Shaka Smart was there. He did not. Look, and you'll get this, it's a great job, but it's a very difficult job because you've got so many bosses. Again, he may have some interest in going back to college. But at this point, he may either retire and go into TV before he coach college. But it would be great to have him back, no doubt.
Yeah, I don't know with the way the world of college athletics is today. I just don't see anybody who's a pro coach would ever go back to college. I just don't see it happening.
No.
Brent, there's still some quarterbacks. The portal's closed at the moment. It'll open back up, and I'm sure more quarterbacks, especially after spring ball, will be entered into the portal. There's some out there, but nobody that I could care less about, quite honestly.
Yeah, in the list of the guys who are still available, Jake Garcia of Miami. A lot of folks may not even realize he left. Sam Heward of Washington, Chance Nolan of Oregon State, John Paddock of Ball State, Hazik Daniels of Air Force, and remember Mike Wright of Vanderbilt. So those are your quarterbacks who are available at this moment. Now, again, the portal is closed, but the portal will reopen again May 1 and will go through May 15. So if players like it or not, there are some limitations on when the next time it opens, and frankly, for roster management, Shane, that's going to be some help to the coaches.
Yeah, that is true. Couple of people who have committed elsewhere or flipped, and then I'm sure everybody that watches this program that follows recruiting knows that the cornerback Cormani McClain is going from Miami to Colorado. Not surprised at all.
Right.
But man, the tight end Eric Gilbert, who was at LSU, went to Georgia. Now he's going to Nebraska. It seems like Nebraska has become the place where all people going to the portal are heading to Nebraska. To me,
there are a lot of people who are going, so that may be a real opportunity for them. But Eric Gilbert has committed to Nebraska. But look, and we would be less than honest if we didn't say the thing with Eric is he just has got to get his act together and actually get on the field. And frankly, of all the places he's been, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Nebraska, he really hasn't been on the field for any length of time. So hopefully he'll get better and he'll be able to play. And he's still 6'5" and 250 and can catch a football. So that's important for him.
Interesting note here. I didn't think about this till I read your notes about championship weekend. The 4 quarterbacks playing this weekend, none of them were really highly regarded.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is a 3-star guy, and then obviously Joe Burrow had to transfer before year 4, and we know about Jalen Hurts, who went from Alabama to Oklahoma, and then Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant too. So yeah, it really shows you that if you're good, the NFL can find you, and regardless of how if you're a 3-star, 4-star, or 2-star, you can improve and you can get better and you can find yourself along the way, and all those guys have.
Hey, Chris Doing Mortgage. They do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Doing Mortgage today, 352-244-0840. Speaking with Brent Beaird on the Titan MR hotline. Brent, we got some other stuff I want to get to, but Cliff here on Facebook Live just asked a question or made a statement. What about the offensive lineman we got from Kentucky? Big pickup. I saw a stat, and I'm sure you got it in your notes once we get closer to Florida, but Billy, the average of an offensive lineman that Billy has signed is like 6'5" or 6'6", 335. He's bringing in some big jokers on the front line.
Yeah, he really has. They've done a really good job on the line. Now, unfortunately, Cameron Waits tore his Achilles, so he's out indefinitely, and he was 6'8", 373. But that, and again, Goodwin, the guy they got from Kentucky, is 6'8", 351. Now, and I'll just say this, and we'll get into it in a few minutes. But what people need to look at is what they have done instead of what they haven't done. This Rashada stuff has gotten the publicity. We understand that. But in the meantime, they've done a good job in bringing guys in and restocking this roster. And people need to take a close look at that. We get the quarterback situation, but you've also got to have people around him, and that's what they're trying to do, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about the quarterback here in a second. You got a little section here about who will be the starting QB in 2023 for the SEC teams. And we'll start with Alabama because it's in alphabetical order. I've told you, Brent, I think, and I told JC, I have a better chance of being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys than Jalen Milroe lining up at quarterback for Alabama.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And again, I give Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South the credit for this. It's a very interesting article, and he picks the possible starters. But Ty Simpson really is their better quarterback. He is a natural thrower. He's done a good job. They've also got a kid from Louisiana, Eli Holstein, who is in, who they like a lot too. But look, I'm with you on Milroe. He's a good kid. He's a hard worker, and he can take the ball in the run, as we saw against Arkansas when he came in to replace Bryce Young. But the reality of it is, and Shane, I think you saw him in the bowl game. He had a chance to come in late in the game, and the only pass he threw basically fell at the receiver's feet. Came in against Austin Peay, threw an awful interception. So, I mean, he'll get his opportunity, but agree 100%. Ty Simpson's a better quarterback.
And then Auburn, they're predicting to go with Robbie Ashford because they didn't get anybody in the portal, correct? So far,
they really haven't. So now they've got some younger guys, but I think Hugh Freeze wants to give Ashford a look and kind of see where that's going to go. But I mean, again, and Auburn's really rebuilding too. The best thing Auburn's done is, like Florida, is they're stocking up on offensive linemen, which is something they did not do under Gus Malzahn.
The Gators, Graham Mertz will probably be the starter. The more people I talk to say that they think this was a good pickup by Billy Napier. Time will tell. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I agree with that, and I think what Graham Mertz can do, he's not going to wow you with his stats at Wisconsin, but they needed an experienced quarterback to come in. And one thing I said all of last year about Anthony Richardson was, look, there were times Richardson could make elite plays, but the problem Anthony had was he couldn't hit the back coming out of the backfield 8 yards down the field on 3rd and 7. So if nothing else, if Mertz can just come in and make, how would you put it, Shane, average and normal plays and keep the offense rolling, I think that's what they need as much as anything else.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. And in Georgia, Carson Beck is scheduled to be the starter, but he's waiting his time. We'll see. There's two really talented kids, Brock Vandergriff and Gunnar Stockton, hanging in the wings. So we'll see. I'll go through this real. Kentucky has Devin Leary, who's a solid player, but boy, he's got a lot of injury issues. Obviously, Jaden Daniels coming back from LSU. He's got Brady Cook with Missouri. The one that's interesting to me is, well, there's two. There's my home state. Will Rogers obviously is coming back, but it's going to be a totally different system. And I'm anxious to see if he can play in a different type of system, because he ran the same system, the air raid, in high school.
Yes. Yeah. And you can help us flesh this out, but they are based that they've been used and they recruited to the air raid, but that's not what they're going to be doing. Kevin Barbie, who you may or may not know, is their new offensive coordinator. So they are making a change, and this is Arnett, who is a defense coordinator, is now the head coach at Mississippi State. So that's going to be a good question, Shane, is how quickly can Will Rogers adapt to this new system?
And then at Ole Miss, they have three quarterbacks. Spencer Sanders, who's played a lot of football, transferred there. You got Jackson Dart, who played well at times last year for them. And then you got the kid, I can't think of his name, Howard, that transferred from LSU.
Yeah.
He's a young guy. The other guys
Walker
are older.
Howard, yes.
Walker Howard. So we'll see what Lane Kiffin has up his sleeve there for sure. Brent, when you look at, let's go back to Alabama. Who is going to be their coordinators? What are you hearing?
Well, Pete Golden is out. He's going to Ole Miss, and he'll have a lot more freedom there. But as far as on the defensive side of the ball, they really want Jeremy Pruitt back. And obviously Jeremy Pruitt was involved coaching Tennessee. Now, the NCAA told Tennessee that they would have, it's either 60 or 90 days, and whatever that number is, that is supposed to be up this week, that they would get back to them. So there's a real opportunity for the NCAA to let Tennessee know their decision either this week or next week. And if there's no show cause on here for Jeremy Pruitt, I think Alabama would like to hire him back either as D coordinator or some other capacity. Jim Leonard of Wisconsin, Glenn Schumann, the co-coordinator at Georgia, along with Will Muschamp, is other possibility. It's really up in the air as far as the offense coordinator. Bill O'Brien's going back to New England. Jeff Labby, who is at Ole Miss now with Oklahoma, is a possibility. Dan Mullen is no longer a candidate for that job. He is, and you may know more about this, but he's taken his name out, and certainly some of the media have said the same thing. Others mention Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Brady, yes, the Joe Brady who is at LSU, Scott Frost, and so they're still recruiting. The next signing day is next Wednesday. Not sure if Saban will announce anything or the university will between now and then, but within the next week, that there should be something decided on this.
Yeah, the out of those names that you mentioned for OC, the only one I can even think of that would have a chance or even think about taking that job would be Joe Brady. He's kind of a multiple type offense, kind of what Alabama's been doing. I don't know where he is now, but there is no way, in my opinion, that Nick Saban hires Cliff Kingsbury to run what he does. No way.
Yeah.
I just don't see that happening. And Mullen's making way too much money in TV to even think about going to coach.
Yeah, well, and see, the other thing is, and let's be honest about this, Mullen's not a great recruiter, and that's something Saban insists on with his assistants, and also in fairness to Dan, how long is Dan going to be there before he's looking for another head job? So that there are a lot of things there. Joe Brady has been in the NFL, is where he has been. Matter of fact, I think he was with the Bills, if I'm not mistaken with that. So, but you're right. He may welcome a return to the college ranks.
Yes, I agree with that. I just don't see those other guys at all. Arkansas hired Dan Enos as their OC. He's been around the league. I think he's been at Arkansas before. What do you think about that hire, Brent?
Well, they love it. That they think it's a good hire, and if that name is familiar, Dan Enos was at Miami, and he was also at Alabama. As a matter of fact, Saban was going to make him the offensive coordinator, and he left before that happened. So, but they think he'll be okay. And the reason he's coming in, obviously, Kendall Briles, a previous OC, is now with TCU. So we will. But yeah, I think they're pretty happy with Enos right now, and they're expected to hire Deron Wilson as their secondary coach too, and he was a cornerbacks analyst in Gainesville in 2022.
Who was?
Deron Wilson. Are you familiar? Are you familiar with that name?
Never heard of that guy. And he was an analyst at Florida?
Yeah. They're on 3 Sports, and their report on him, they mentioned that he was a cornerbacks analyst at Florida in 2022.
So that would have been this past year. Interesting.
Yeah.
Have no idea who he is. Never heard of him. Nothing against him. That's shocking. Brent, the Auburn broadcast crew has made a change. What happened with Stan White? Jason Campbell's going to take over. Should I be worried about my job as well?
No. Jason will be fine. And here's the interesting thing, and you'll appreciate this greatly. That now they've had Charlie Trotman. Seems like they always get quarterbacks, which there's nothing wrong with that. Stan White, now Jason Campbell. They've had like 3 analysts and like 30 years or something of that nature. It's not a job that people give up at all. So Campbell's the newest guy. No, I think Stan just had he wanted a break. I think with family, business, and so forth. So that was announced a few days ago that Jason Campbell would be the new guy for them. Auburn got a big transfer from Kentucky on the defensive line, Justin Rogers, and they got a linebacker transfer, Austin Keys from Ole Miss. So Hugh Freeze making a little bit of news.
Yes, he has. A couple of Facebook Lives before we move on here. Joseph said, Alabama's athletic department is building another new building, the NIL headquarters. Will that be the next big thing to have? Are you familiar with what y'all are building in Alabama, Brent?
Yes, they are building its own building that has something to do with NIL. I don't know all the bells and whistles about it yet, but I think that's an astute point. Now think about that, Shane. That's amazing, isn't it? That schools and over the next few years will have a dedicated building to NIL. That tells you how that's changed college football, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. Andy says Deron Wilson was an off-the-field quality control guy at UF. So that's probably why I don't know who he is, because there's a million of those roaming at practice. But good, congratulations to him. Good for him.
Absolutely.
All right, Brent, let's get to the Gators. They've picked up some linemen, especially one, I think it was yesterday, from the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, this guy, I think is a very good pickup. Kenyatta, and I may be mispronouncing that, Goodwin. He is 6'8", 351, which is incredible. But he did a good job at Kentucky, and as we said a few minutes ago, for people tuning in late, Billy Napier and the crew have recruited 13 offensive linemen to Florida since arriving in Gainesville. And Shane, I say this all the time. I don't care how good your skill position but players are. If you can't block for them, that's an issue. And we mentioned Will Levis a few minutes ago. Well, the Kentucky offensive line this year was one of the worst in the conference because of very injuries and so forth. And he would get sacked 3 or 4 or more times a game. So if you can protect your quarterbacks and open up holes for the running backs, you'll be way ahead of the game.
Yes, that's true. Also, they picked up a running back to add to the running back room from Tulane.
Yes, yeah. And Cameron Carroll is a guy that they picked up. He rushed for 1,600 yards. Now, look, that's over 5 seasons. I get that. But he had some depth with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. They also got Manny Nunnery from Houston, who's a linebacker out of the portal, played at Shadow Creek, Texas, at that point, too. So, by the way, the Reynolds kid at running back, if people haven't heard this, transferred to Pittsburgh. I was really glad to see Ricky Pearsall come back, the wide receiver. As we mentioned a few minutes ago, folks missed it. Cameron Waits tore his Achilles, and that's in January. I hope you've never had that injury, Shane, but I understand people who do. That's a tough one to get over.
No doubt about it. Real quick before we get you out of here, Brent, let's talk about this day in sports, brought to you by our good friends at Comfort Temp. Comfort is our business. Peace of mind is our promise. Give Comfort Temp Heating and Air a call at 352-376-2366. This day in sports, 40 years ago today, in 1983, Paul Bear Bryant passed away. And I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yep, I do too.
So that was brought to you by our good friends at Comfort. Brent, good stuff as always. We got to get to Kyle Crooks, turn it over to him. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football games, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Great. Thanks, Shane. Always enjoy it.
Yep, that's Brent Beaird. Join us on the Titan Tomorrow Hotline. Going to take a quick time out, come back. Kyle Crooks and Graham Hall will join the program. You're watching and listening to Pot Up Matthews in the Morning.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peaceland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise.
Campus USA Credit Union.
QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, and watch. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wibby, Realtor Caldwell Banker, MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Aver and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Q Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Calling Gator Nation. You're invited to be part of Gator history on Friday, February 10th for the official dedication of Steve Spurrier Way at Celebration Point Promenade in front of Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Lots of dignitaries and press will be on hand to witness this historic event. And it's open to all who bleed orange and blue. It's the grand unveiling of Steve Spurrier Way. It's all happening Friday, February 10th from 5:30 to 6:15 at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in Celebration Point.
Welcome back. Second half of Matthews in the Morning. Kyle Crooks, joined by Graham Hall of 24/7 Sports. I'm sure you know Graham's work has been covering the Gators for a while, and I'm sure he's been on the show before, but I'm excited to have Graham on the show, talk a little Gator basketball. He was at the game last night covering it, big win over South Carolina. Of course, Gator football as well. There's certainly a lot going on with the transfer portal and how this roster is going to shape out for next year. First things first, Graham, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. It was a great game last night. I was at it at the Exact Tech Arena. Saw Florida win their 5th game in the last 6 contests. Defeated a pretty, interesting South Carolina team that has one of the best players in the country in my mind, but around him, not much talent. And I think you saw that last night as G.G. Jackson had 20 points. But the Gators were up by 30 with 5 minutes to play, end up winning by 21. Great game. Good to be there, and always happy to join you, man. Fan of your work, I got to say.
I appreciate it, man. And G.G. Jackson, you're right. I mean, it's a lottery pick on a team that's not very good. Kind of reminds you of Anthony Edwards on maybe the Georgia team a few years ago. But Graham, let's chat about this basketball team. They've won 5 of the last 6, like you mentioned. Team trending in the right direction. Last night, the assist number is incredibly high. They had season high 21 assists, only 6 turnovers. I think I saw it's the 3rd straight game under 10 turnovers. Myron Jones is a big reason for that. Kyle Lofton feels like they've, between Lofton and Jones in the backcourt, this is a pretty good group right now, and they're going to need every bit of how good they've played over the next 4 games.
Yeah, last year when Florida brought Myron Jones in after he had spent 3 years at Penn State, I think that former coach Mike White was pretty aware of how good of a ball handler Myron Jones was. Not fantastic at creating his own shot off the dribble, which is something that Florida really wanted in its offense last year. A lot of teams covet that, obviously. You don't, I think, really get a lot of that from him. And that led to Tyree Appleby being the team's point guard last year, a position that really isn't Tyree's true position. Myron with a true point guard in the backcourt next to him, and Kyle Lofton, where he can kind of be this combo guard role, work as the ball handler as well, while also being freed up in the corner, getting open shots at the top of the arc, in the corner, on the wing. When he can do that, he really has a chance to play his best basketball. A guy who isn't going to push the pace too much, but he's getting better in transition. He's confident at driving to the rim, really understands positioning, which makes you want to play him on a team like this that struggles to rebound because just a good amount of shots fall off the rim in his direction. You saw that last night when he had 10 rebounds. I mean, that's incredible for a guy of his size. I think that really speaks to his experience. And I got to say this is why coaches sometimes are hesitant to come out and proclaim a starting lineup at the beginning of a season, because a lot of that can change. Todd Golden has said time and time again that rotations are fluid, and it's going to be often determined by how players compete in games, and sometimes their usage will be predicated by strong performances in practice. But he's going to continually assess things rather than being stuck in his ways. Not saying that previous coaches were necessarily, but that mindset has allowed Myron Jones to kind of ascend from the outside looking in. There was a time in fall camp where Florida had really zeroed in on its rotation and was looking at being a primary backcourt duo of Lofton and Trey Bonham. And you saw a lot of that this season too. But when SEC play got here and Florida was struggling with rebounds, had double-digit turnovers in nearly every single game, they had to turn to Myron Jones to kind of steady the offense at times and make some better decisions with the basketball. It really came off of Trey Bonham's 7 turnover game at Texas A&M on January 4th. Myron was already playing a large role off the bench before that, but now you've seen him move to the starting lineup, and it's really paying dividends for this Florida team that has found ways to consistently improve when it comes to its faults throughout the season, which I think that aspect of this team's development this season alone, their in-season improvement, is something worth noting, especially as we turn the attention to this very daunting stretch coming up where they're going to play 3 top 5 teams over the next 2 weeks, Kyle.
Yeah, it is an interesting stretch coming up. Nothing tougher that we'll see over the next 4 games in college basketball. Are you in the market to buy or sell your home? Doreen Wiebe, a realtor with Caldwell Banker MM Parish, will provide you with fast, friendly, and reliable service. Call her today at 352-562-1411 to help your dreams come home. Marrying the defense, and this team's top 10 in defensive efficiency, marrying the offense with the defense, that's the big thing right now. And if they could do that, this team would be very dangerous. Now, obviously that's easier said than done. I was talking yesterday, and it seems to me Reeves is going to be an X factor for this team. And Graham, it seems like maybe his shot's starting to fall a little bit. And if you get Richard and Reeves to start knocking down some shots, I think this team is a legitimate threat. What do you think?
3-point shooting is so valuable in the current game. And I know that kind of sounds obvious to say, but I say that because we sometimes, as a result, overvalue it at times, because when a player like Kawasi Reeves or even Myron Jones, I think is a good example of this, when their 3-point shot isn't falling, we tend to moan and groan and complain about their usage. when really that's not the complete picture. I think that, in this day and age, you and I know that there's an abundance of resources out there for evaluating player performance. We're kind of, in the Renaissance era of analytics when it comes to basketball, and quantifying how good a player is on the defensive end is something that has been a process. And there are these sites like Synergy that rate players' defensive performances, even when they're not contributing in a statistical setting, plus minus, steals, blocks. And to that end, Kawasi Reeves is one of the few Florida defenders that grades out as excellent by Synergy, which I think is something that people, not even just fans, media, outsiders, national media, local media, I think tend to miss about Kawasi Reeves is that with his 6'6" size, his aggression on the defensive end, and how he seems to grade out by these analytical gurus of the sport, I think kind of really speak to the full picture more of his usage for Florida and how he can be so valuable, because it is more than just that 3-point shot. He has a lot of ways that he contributes, gets out in transition. You saw a couple of those nice one-handed slams last night that kind of, are so defeating for the opponent to have to deal with. He's found many ways to contribute, being an aggressive driver to the lane, cutting well with less hesitance, and shooting his shot, just shooting confidently, were things that he really wanted to focus on coming into year 2. And I think you're seeing a lot of that come to fruition, but also his defense. He absolutely realized that to realize his goals of playing at the next level, he's going to have to become an elite defender. And he has really embraced that this season. Also, one more thing to note, I think that a lot of that is, sometimes opportunity presents itself under, subpar, suboptimal circumstances. And for Kawasi Reeves, getting a chance to play a few more minutes right now, get out of his quote unquote shooting slump. I wouldn't really call it that. He's just not seeing it fall as much as he'd like it to. But with Alex Fudge suffering that concussion at Florida's previous game, not playing in the second half, missing last night's contest, they're going to play a lot, quote unquote, small ball lineups where Will Richard moves to the 4, even though Will Richard's not really a small guy whatsoever. I mean, Florida fans have seen 6'5" guys come through. Keontae Johnson played the 4 here at Florida. Will Richard, very similar in body type. I think that absolutely when they're going to have to play Richard at the 4, it's going to make a way for Kawasi Reeves or Riley Kugel, who had a really good night last night. One of those two guys is going to slide over, play the 3 for Florida, and give them a little more shooting while keeping some length on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Riley. Riley had a really good game last night as well. Hey, Gator fans, come on. Our Florida legend, Steve Spurrier. Steve Spurrier Way is officially unveiled on February 10th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. at the promenade in front of Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in Celebration Point. Go Gators. This 4-game stretch coming up for those that don't know. So you got number 5, Kansas State on the road. You got number 4, Tennessee at home. At Kentucky is the only unranked opponent at Rupp Arena. And then you go on the road at Alabama, who's number 2 in the country. Bama was in a slugfest last night with Mississippi State, kind of had to grind out a win at home. You look at this stretch realistically, Graham, can this team grab 2 of the next 4? Do you think from a player and a coach perspective, you want to win all 4, you're not even talking about that. But from a fan, from an objective observer, can you get 2 of the next 4? What do you think?
That's optimistic, honestly. I mean, I think that if you can avoid going winless, that's a success in my mind. I mean, going into Rupp Arena, stealing a win there. I know that that's a Kentucky team that has been very up and down this season. Oscar Tshiebwe has not looked as great as he looked last season at times. I think that their offense has looked pretty good, but their defense has given John Cal some fits this season. I think that Florida could possibly steal that one. It's just such a hostile place to play, and it's really hard to get a sense of how good Florida is right now. The Kansas State game, I mean, the way that Keontae Johnson is playing, just what a fantastic story to see. Keontae returning, playing at a high level. That is a guy that I think a lot of people still are invested in his success, even though it's not right now at the University of Florida. And to see him return to college basketball, I mean, there was a time, myself included, who was unsure whether he would ever get that chance to play again. So to see him get that opportunity in general, let alone play at the level that he's playing at. Tremendous to see. And unfortunately for Florida fans, his continued resurgence could come at their expense on Saturday in Manhattan. I think that absolutely that's a team that, has proven tough. They pulled a comeback recently against TCU, rallied against Kansas when they were number 2 in the nation. And this is a tough stretch for Florida. It's not going to get any easier throughout the rest of February. Yeah, they get to play Vanderbilt twice, LSU at home to end the regular season. That's 3 potentially SEC wins right there. Got to go to Georgia. This is a stretch where Florida needs to steal some of these here, or they're going to finish around 500 in the SEC most likely, and that may not be good enough, as Florida fans found out last year. So if they can steal one of these top 5 wins on the road in the next couple of weeks, that is huge for their chances of returning to the NCAA tournament. In this game, fortunately, there's a lot of parity, and I think that Florida will get Alex Fudge back at some point in the next week, maybe 10 days. It could be less than that. You just never really know with concussions, especially in college basketball, how that is going to shake out for a player. So if the Gators cannot go winless, in my mind, and come out of this stretch with one of those wins, I think that they have to feel pretty good. But anything more than that would be a great success. Absolutely. If you can win 2 top 5 games or beat Kentucky, beat a Kansas State team on the road in the last year of the SEC Big 12 Challenge, that would be massive for Florida's, odds, because they only just recently picked up one of those coveted quadrant 1 wins. You got to get some of those. You can't just beat up on quadrant 3 and 4 if you want to make the tournament. And the Gators have a chance. They have plenty of chances to do that in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it is a strong opportunity to really bolster your NCAA tournament resume. Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Visit them at peachlanddental.com and join us on Friday for the Peachland Dentistry JC and the QB weekend picks. All right. So and I just saw this note from Chris Harry, by the way, on Twitter, and I'm sure you have this too, but last 2 games for Myron and Kyle Lofton, 22 assists to no turnovers. It's pretty good. That's pretty good in your backcourt from those 2. Football, there's never a shortage of excitement on that side of things, especially when you try to rebuild a roster and the amount of defections that Florida has had from the roster. They pick up a couple of offensive linemen. They get somebody yesterday from Kentucky, former 5-star. They're really building up that offensive line right now. Let me start here though with the Jaden Rashada saga, I guess is the way you could call it. I necessarily can't really talk about that in my role, but you can because you're around it and you report on it. What can you say about that situation and how everything shook out?
Yeah, we're still in really the infancy of NIL, where teams are figuring out the process. There are a lot of pitfalls to navigate. You're working with agents. You're working with lawyers now. You're really kind of turning college football on its axis in a sense, where for so long, programs were like, hey, don't pay our players, stay away from us, we can't help you with that. And now all of a sudden they're kind of wading into the the deep end here and being like, hey, we can do this now, let's figure this out. And there were a lot of people at the beginning of this who realized that this was a good opportunity to make some money, not just lawyers and agents who could finally for the first time represent college athletes, which there are abundance of college athletes, far more than there are in the NFL. So you really saw the amount of people who were hovering over the sport kind of increase in a sense here, because there was that financial advantage. And then a lot of these people who created these NIL companies, collectives, they understood that there was profit to be made here. And I think when you have a lot of characters who are new to the industry, learning the industry, you aren't sure where their interests lie, you have the chance to make mistakes. And mistakes were made in the process of getting Jaden Rashada to campus. Do I believe that Jaden Rashada, when he went to the Under Armour game and said, I'm moving into Gainesville in a couple of days, I plan on being here, when he told reporters that right before playing in the game, cross country, do I believe that he really intended to enroll in Gainesville in the next couple of days? I absolutely do. this is a situation in my mind where there are so many other people involved in the picture that you could have an 18, 17-year-old kid blindsided by finding out that their future home, their cross-country move, is not coming to fruition because of deals negotiated sometimes unknowingly to them. And, you know, it's good to remind people, I think, of that perspective, because some people are saying horrible things at a lot of people involved here when we don't know the culprit here hasn't necessarily been named, right? People are speculating. I don't want to throw out any names here or add to the speculation here, but I hope many people have realized this is a situation that it's not a typical recruiting situation. We've called this uncharted territory landmark case on Swamp 247. And part of that is because we get the sense that this is not something that the kid necessarily wanted to do. And that makes it new territory here. You are used to prospects decommitting because they get a better offer elsewhere. This was not that case. This was something that I understand was something that blindsided Jaden too. So it's unfortunate that it happened, especially if you're a Florida fan. Unfortunate that it happened if you're Jaden Rashada, in a sense too. I'm not asking for Florida fans to feel sympathy for Jaden Rashada, but this is a situation where we don't really know who to blame right now, and I know that can lead to a little bit of frustration and increased speculation, which I was just hoping to avoid, because really I think a lot of people are still sitting here in the dark, speculating, wondering how this thing fell through past the 11th hour when Cinderella should have been home on the way at her front door in her bed. That carriage still turned into a pumpkin in a sense here, and Florida's still, I think there's still some things that Florida would like to find out about this situation. The best thing that they can do is move forward and learn from this situation so that the mistakes are not repeated, whatever mistakes those were. Let me say that.
Yeah, when it's all the book is written on NIL and they have the chapter on infancy of NIL. This case will be the first story that they use for sure with Jaden Rashada. Add Comfort Temp. Comfort is our business. Peace of mind is our promise. Beat the summer heat and schedule your air conditioners. Tune up today, keeping you chill and the Florida heat far away. Comfort Temp Heating and Air. Call us today, 352-376-2366. Quarterback room heading into this year. Graham Mertz, of course, comes over from Wisconsin. If you're a fan, what level of confidence do you think that you should have in this quarterback room and Billy Napier here in year two?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people already writing the position off. I wouldn't do that necessarily here. There's a lot of reason for optimism in my mind. I know that Graham Mertz had some errant throws when he was with Wisconsin. He really didn't have an amazing offensive line this past year, faced a lot of pressure, forced into some poor decisions. Really, really sound with reading a defense. You're needing a quarterback who's comfortable to come in and hand the ball off 55% of the time, right? Audible out of potential throws that a quarterback wants to make based on the defense. You need a quarterback who's willing to do that. And I think that Mertz gives you more of a game manager in that sense than Anthony Richardson was. No disrespect to Anthony Richardson whatsoever, but I think that Mertz, based on his experience, based on his understanding of his skill set, this is a guy who is, when he has solid protection, he has time to make the throw. He makes good decisions. And from what I've been told, and again, I guess take this with a grain of salt, everybody, but there is a split within Florida's coaching staff. There was initially, at least, where some people considered Mertz to be typical quarterback, average at best. But there are multiple people within that coaching staff that believe that Mertz is a extremely underrated quarterback. And I think the intrigue of that was a big reason why he's here. They want to find out what he's made of. There is, I think, a lot of untapped potential that they're looking to get a better sense of. But the biggest thing is that this is kind of Jack Miller 2.0 in a sense in my mind, because you obviously needed numbers at the position. Not only do you lose Rashada, but you lose 4 guys from last year's team, your starter, Jalen Kitna, and then the 2 walk-ons. So you really just have 3 arms in spring camp. And one of those guys also, Max Brown, the redshirt freshman, is going to be with the Florida baseball team in spring camp. So you really don't know what his availability for spring camp is going to be, although they're going to obviously do their best to get him to be in the building to continue his improvement throughout that 5-week stretch of spring camp. But Mertz was brought in to push Jack Miller. Now, for those who don't know, Jack Miller was the number 2 quarterback on Florida's roster. He didn't ever get quote unquote passed by Jalen Kitna. He fell down the depth chart as a result of his thumb avulsion fracture. And that led to him, being written off, I think, for a long period of time. And he was even still struggling. Billy Napier didn't really come out and directly say this, but he was still struggling to do things like grip the football, throw it with a lot of, strength on it. And I think that he was still finding his form even right into the bowl game on December 17th. That's the guy who I don't think we've seen his best football in the past 4 months. And where he was at before that, I think gives you a lot of reason for optimism that he can build off of that. It's his second year in Billy Napier's offense, and I think he has a chance to be the starting quarterback for Florida. Mertz is going to come in and push him, and you're going to have a quarterback battle that should be pretty interesting in my mind.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we talked about possibly Florida adding another quarterback in Walker Howard. And I think that day that we mentioned on the show, he decided he was going to transfer to Ole Miss. And they had already had Spencer Sanders, I think, transfer there the day before. It's just interesting how some of these transfers work, and the possibility of, we'll see, are the Gators done maybe adding to their roster here, and specifically in that room? We don't know. Want to get this final ad read in before we wrap up here with Graham. Ruse Ogre State Farm Office is a team of dedicated insurance professionals ready to help life go right with the right insurance options for you and your family. Visit ugrainsurance.com or call us at 352-240-1779. If you were to have a crystal ball in front of you, Graham, right now, year 2, Billy Napier, what is the outlook? You start presumably maybe on that Thursday night against Utah, very tough place to play. What do you think what would you place the over under at wins right now for the Gators here in year 2 of this coaching staff?
I mean, 6.5, unfortunately. I think that you want to see some improvement. I don't think anyone should be banking on seeing the similar leap that you saw Louisiana, where he goes 7-5 to double-digit win seasons. I think that Florida having 6 top 25 opponents on the schedule coming off a 6-7 finish means that you pretty much just want to win one more game this season, potentially. If you can go out to Utah and steal one, incredible in my mind. You're going to have to face an abundance of top 25 opponents, like I said, this season here. So you're going to have to win some games against ranked competition and subvert some expectations. The real interesting thing for me, and not to get ahead of ourselves here, is just to see how Florida deals with from a numbers standpoint necessarily, because numbers were certainly a huge issue coming out of the off season, heading into spring camp. If you don't have a full roster of guys who are going to play in abundance for you next season, you're really not going to have a chance to build off of that foundational year. So Florida's going to need to do that and maximize that in spring camp for them to have a chance to win more than 6 games this season. In my mind, I do think that improvements are being made, but it's going to be really, really difficult for Florida to go out there and win 8-9 games, which I know a lot of people would like to see happen, to see Florida continue their ascension. It could be a similar route, more so to maybe Mike Norvell, where, 3-4 years ends up getting that program back into the national conversation, or it could be like Kirby Smart. I know the Florida fans love to loathe Kirby Smart, but it took him 5-6 years to get to the level that he is at right now, to be a dominant head coach and have Georgia back at the forefront of the national. So I think that there's a pattern for patience when you look around the SEC, and for Florida fans, they may need to do that for a couple more years than they initially envisioned.
And Graham, by the way, too, where can people read your work, and is there anything that you're working on right now?
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I got a couple things on basketball team coming out a little bit later today, just an update on the net rankings we'll have some football stuff starting next week as well. Some position previews, ranking the top 25 guys returning to Florida will be coming throughout February. So a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of recruiting news as well. That's all on swamp247.com. We're always running some deals. There should be one that's a really good offer pretty soon. If you're not a member, join the largest message board community. Excuse me, I haven't had my water this morning. Join the largest message board community in Florida football, for the Florida football program right now. Like I said, we're always running deals. I'm not supposed to plug it too much, but when you do end up, subscribing and paying the annual fee, if you do pay the full annual fee, that comes with Paramount Plus, undefeated deal. You get a full year streaming service. You can watch soccer, all your favorite shows, a lot of great stuff on there. And you can find me at Swamp 247. We're always answering questions, having a lot of fun, innocuous debate. I'll say that. So come join us. And looking forward to being back next time. We'll have to do this again soon, Kyle. It's great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly one of the best on the beat, Graham Hall. Make sure you follow him on Twitter as well. So great job from Graham. Great job from our producer, Tammy. Shane will be back tomorrow. I'll be back next week. I'll actually have Gators softball coach Tim Walton next week. So we'll get a chance to have a primer on the softball season next week. So for Graham, I'm Kyle. Peace out, everybody.